want to thank everyone, and especially Tom, for having the two of us speak today. It's been a really, really harrowing past month and a half, and coming back to the United States and visiting Canada has been such a relief to me after all the things that I saw. And I thought I'd just share 3 quick stories today to illustrate just how depraved and evil the system is, and how important it is for us to take action in solidarity with the really incredible Chinese activists who are doing great work on the ground to make sure this industry stops and ends, I hope within the next 5 years. The 3 stories are the stories of my first time walking into a dog meat restaurant, the first time I walked into a dog farm, and the first time I walked into a dog meat slaughterhouse. And, to start with the first story, all of us have been to McDonald's, KFC, or some restaurant that serves dead animals at some point in our lives. But I cannot describe the intensity and the anxiety I felt. I'm not a particularly kind of an anxious activist nowadays. I've been an animal rights activist for 15 years. I'm one of the founders of Direct Action Everywhere. I usually find myself not fazed by new situations and intense demonstrations. But walking into a dog meat restaurant had my heart pounding, the sweat was coming off my brow, and I literally felt like someone was going to hurt me. And I knew that wasn't going to happen, but just the idea that I was going to see the flesh of dogs sitting on tables terrified me in a way that I didn't even quite understand. And on some level, I think all of us who care about animals realize that there really isn't that much of a difference if somebody's eating a steak at a steakhouse or eating a dog meat platter in Yulin. But there was something about the vivid reality of walking in a restaurant where dogs no different than my little kids at home, Lisa and Natalie, had been killed and carved up that just shook me. But interestingly, the moment I walked in, it just felt like another restaurant. The dogs had been completely removed from kind of any sort of visible marketing. So you saw dog meat on the menu, you saw pieces of flesh on plates, but for all I knew, this could have been beef or pork or chicken. It was really hard to tell. It was in stews and on plates. And the people were otherwise just completely normal too. And just like at any restaurant, you get good customer service. The guy comes up, asks me if I'd like a seat, if I'd like something to eat. And the thing that shook me over the long term, obviously the thing that shook me when I first walked in was the fact they were serving dogs. But the thing that's shaken me over the long term is just how normal it all was. The fact that you could walk into this restaurant, they were killing and eating dogs to serve the flesh on these plates. But it was just like any restaurant that you'd see in Toronto, in the Bay Area, or anywhere across the world. And so I had this pleasant conversation with the gentleman who was the manager of the store. And, my goal was to convince him to tell me where his suppliers were so we could find out, how we could infiltrate these farms and slaughterhouses, get cameras inside, and eventually take as many of the dogs out as we possibly could. And the other thing that surprised me was how embarrassed and ashamed the guy seemed to be that he was even dealing with the trade. When they're selling meat as meat, when it's just a product on the table, they're very proud of it. They want to sell it to you. They tell you about how it's so tasty, it's so crispy, it's got this really special flavor. But when you start asking about the live animals, even the people who are benefiting directly, who are profiting off of the slaughter of these dogs, have this trepidation about them. They don't quite understand why you're asking. And I think part of this is because of the international campaign against dog meat. But partly this is because even people who sell dead animals for profit understand on some level that it's wrong. And so the more I probed, the more the gentleman who at first was incredibly nice to me, energetic, he was a young guy, very fashionably dressed, the more I dug into this, the more it became apparent to me that he was ashamed by what he was doing. And, when I eventually convinced him to give me a tip as to where we could find live dogs, I told him, hey, I'll give you some money for this tip, because, he'd given us really important information. But he rejected it and said, no, I don't want your money. And I could tell that he felt somewhat bad about the fact that he was involved in an industry that was trading in animal lives. So that's kind of the first story that was kind of striking. The second is, we get to the market, and the market leads us to a farm. And when I walk into a farm, the first thing that I realize is, first of all, that it's not actually a dog farm. It is a pig farm that has been converted into a dog farm. And like so many farmers in China, this farmer, due to Western competition from companies like Smithfield, was forced out of business and had to find something else to sell. And what he decided to sell was dogs, because dogs are a species of animal that Western companies are not trading in. So he knew he could get a price that would allow him to survive and continue to make a profit. And that was shocking to me. But the other that was incredibly shocking to me was when I started talking to this gentleman, I realized that, like so many farmers in the United States, and this is Oliver, fucking his ears up now, because he knows we're talking about his home for the first year of his life. But like so many farmers in the United States, despite the fact that Oliver was in decrepit, miserable conditions, he lived in a small concrete tent indoors with a leaky roof, water falling over him, feces everywhere, his skin covered with parasites, his belly filled with tapeworms that were making it round and distended the way you'll see starving children with big bellies in Africa or South Asia. Despite the fact that there was so much misery and suffering and filth in this farm, this farmer was proud of what he was doing. When I asked him about these dogs and the condition they were in, he said, I do a great job of raising my animals. And it was so similar, eerily similar to what farmers in the United States and Canada say about how their farms are humane, how the animals are well treated, how they're proud to be farmed, despite the fact that the animals, by all objective measures, are living in utter misery. And so when I pulled out my camera, I was at first thinking, I'm going to have to be very careful about this and pretend I'm just talking on my phone or messing around on my iPhone to get some photographs. But the guy was completely unapologetic about showing me everything in the farm and allowed me to take photographs. And that was shocking to me, and that leads to my second point. The first point is that even people who sell animals are often ashamed when you confront them with the reality that they're killing sentient beings for food and for profit. But the second thing is the only thing that allows them to sustain themselves is self-deception. And this guy, the farmer in Yulin, China, who I talked to and we smuggled the dogs away from, he himself had convinced himself and his entire family that all the dogs living in this decrepit farm are living in wonderful conditions. And again, this shows you the deep similarities between animal abuse in the United States and Canada and the West and animal abuse in China. In all these cases, the industry relies on deception, and self-deception is a big part of it, because for consumers, for industry officials, even for the farmers themselves, to continue doing what they're doing, they need to lie. They need to lie first and foremost themselves. So fast forward a few more days, we've rescued a few of the dogs from this dog farm, and now we've moved to the slaughterhouse. We've identified a large slaughterhouse, in fact, the largest slaughterhouse in Yulin. And this was when things got pretty dangerous, and I actually got beaten up quite a few times trying to take photographs. But the thing that was most remarkable about the slaughterhouse, the third phase of our investigation, was when because of the shame that these industry and officials and these dog meat traders and animal users feel, when self-deception no longer works, and slaughter is certainly the part of the process of production of meat where no one can deny that the animals are screaming in pain, that they do not want to die. When you reach the point in the production where no one can deny these animals are suffering, then they can't rely on self-deception anymore, and they have to rely on suppression, on silencing, and sometimes even using physical violence. So in Yulin, the moment any foreigners walk into Yulin, you have dog meat traders and undercover police officers who've been bribed by the dog meat industry, following you around, preventing you from taking a photograph. And unlike the farm on the outskirts of Yulin, in rural areas, in the urban areas of Yulin, where the dog slaughterhouses and dog markets are, where they're actually selling the meat, the moment you pull a camera out, there is a horde of dog meat traders surrounding you, waiting to grab your camera, beat you, and even arrest you and raid your apartment. And that's exactly what happened to us. But it is the same in the United States and Canada and the West, with statutes like the Ag Act statutes or the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act. When the industry realizes that its deceptions have failed, it has to rely on violence, force, and suppression. And the only way for us to overcome that is to be brave enough to challenge that repression and speak truth to power. And that requires us sometimes to go to the places where animals are being tortured and to bear witness, and sometimes even break the animals out. And that's exactly what we did for Oliver and his two brothers. I am so proud and honored to have him here with me, but he is just one of the tens of thousands of animals that are being killed in Yulin this week. And one of the tens of thousands of animals that is being killed every hour in the United States and Canada. Right? And these animals are no different than Oliver. When you meet Oliver, you realize, this is such a funny guy. He likes chasing his ball. We didn't even have to teach him to fetch. He loves to play fetch. He loves chasing his cat friend in the house. So, like all of us, when there's a cat running in the house, he can't stop himself from staring, and sometimes he goes after the cat and runs around with him. course, always non-violently because he's a good DXC dog, so he believes in non-violence. He has all the same joys, all the same yearnings, all the same social passions that we have. You know, he's fallen in love with me and my girlfriend Priya. He's not as familiar as some of the other people in the house, and he's taking time to get to know them. And he's anxious and shy because of all the trauma he's faced. So he's just like all of us. He has all the same fears, the same pleasures, the same yearnings that we have. And when you meet him, you realize that he is a unique individual with a unique personality. But the same is true for all of the other thousands and thousands of dogs and cats who died this week, and all the other millions and millions of animals who are dying every day in the West to serve the human bloodthirst for food. We need to stop this. We need to challenge it. And the only way for us to do this is to get out there on the streets, as all of you are doing today at this vigil, and raise awareness, and frankly directly challenge these systems non-violently, sometimes with our own bodies. And if we do that, I think we can share these stories with the world and show the world that we mean business, and that when we say we care about animals, and animals' lives are their own, we mean what we're saying. So thank you all so much for being here today. Thank you so much for joining me and Oliver. I hope all of you have a very powerful vigil and memorial for all the dogs and cats in Yulin. But I hope you also remember all of the other animals who are going to be dying in the West and in China over the course of the rest of the year. And it's so important for us to get out there, because if we are not out there, who will? If we are not speaking for the animals and fighting for the animals, who will? And if we do, I think we can change the world so much faster than most people think. So thank you very much, and I actually have to go off now.